G'day all and welcome back to the Freo Faithful podcast. A bit of a special edition podcast this one. We haven't done one in a couple of weeks because there hasn't been a lot to discuss. We considered talking about the trade period, but there was one trade to get through. Will Brodie and Liam Reedy left, and that would have been a bit boring. I don't think anyone would have wanted to listen to us discuss that for an hour. So instead, we've got our focus ahead on the draft, which takes place in just under a month. And today I am joined by Chris from WA Footy Prospects. Mate, how are you?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, and I'm pretty excited for this draft because it's an interesting one. We've drafted a bit higher up in the order in the last few years. This one, we're not necessarily taking a back seat, but I reckon we've got a few more academy prospects than in recent years, and that really gets the mind going on how we get them all onto our list and what other WA talent we can get to the Dockers, because it's definitely a weaker draft class compared to recent years, and I think the WA crop is one that we, or Freo fans at least, have looked at a little bit more closely this year compared to recent years. Since your time sort of closely covering and following the under-18 championships and just the draft as a whole, where does your confidence sit with this WA crop compared to recent years?
Well, with this one, you probably won't see too many of the top prospects go into sort of that top echelon. So you probably only see about maybe one taken maybe in the first 15 and two out of 30. And then you'll probably see where that kind of depth comes in towards like the back end from maybe 30 to I think maybe 60 onwards, I think. With Fremantle having sort of one pick sort of in the first round, sort of the later first round, and then probably another one, I think around that 40 mark, it probably could get probably like a gun WA player that choose to go that route.
Yeah, well, it is an interesting one because you sort of every club sort of goes into the draft with one mindset or another. Do you go for a position in need at your club, or do you just go best available? And in last year's draft, I don't necessarily think Murphy Reid was a position of massive need for us, but he was the best available on the draft board. He slipped a fair way and he ended up having a great year. Do you think there are any glaring gaps in our list that need to be filled, or is it just going to be sort of a more best available type of draft and just try and pick homegrown, given we've already got a fair bit of natural development that will take place within our young core next year?
I think generally most clubs go into the mindset of with the first round, get the best sort of 20 odd kids available and then reassess from there, because you never know sort of like maybe some players who probably would be in that sort of top 20 mark, but slide, that's when you probably can reevaluate sort of how you approach the draft. I think it's kind of the same. Whereas with someone who probably would maybe be that top 40 mark, but bolted in that sort of top 20. So I think with the draft, you can't really expect too much. Probably just go and see what happens, and then afterwards just kind of see what follows. And just with Fremantle, what was your question again? Sort of about sort of how Fremantle's list. So I think
Yeah.
generally, yeah, I think it's pretty good. I don't think there's too many sort of holes to fill per se. I think their best 23 is really good, and then probably maybe that sort of 24, 26 is still decent as well. I think probably after seeing like this sort of trade period where you've probably seen sort of certain positions such as the ruck and small forward area probably would be the massive need for Fremantle to fill this draft, because I think there's a fair few players have either delisted or retired. So like Michael Walters left, Jack Delene's left, Liam Reedy's left. So I think those are the guys that probably David Walls and sort of the list management team probably look at sort of filling.
Yeah, I would have thought it was an off-season to go in and get some real high-end talent. I think it's more of just replacing sort of the lower echelon players in our best 23. I think we've already done that with Judd McPhee, who probably slips into the spot of a Bailey Banfield. And then whether there's some higher-end WA talent that could maybe fight for a spot, maybe not from round one, but at some point next year, I think it's a real possibility. As I mentioned a bit earlier, the NGA is quite a talking point in this year's draft, particularly in the case of Fremantle. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not the draft guru that you are, but the higher picks that we currently have in the hundreds, we've got 103 and 108 at the moment. They'll likely be used as points to probably match a bid for a Toby Whan or someone in that sort of mold, or someone from our NGA. Where do you see him in particular getting picked? And do you think we'll be able to get him in that sort of 47 range, or will we have to pay up a little bit to match a bid that someone else makes?
With the picks in the triple digits of the 103, so this year the AFL did change the draft value index. So what sort of picks equates to points? I think that was changed from pick 73 last year would have been sort of the last pick that had a point, and then I think this year might have been maybe 54. I think so. Any picks later from 55 onwards has no value. So I think really,
Okay.
I think yeah. So the first 54 picks only have like set value. So I think with Toby Whan, probably you could get him as he could go undrafted in the national draft and have Fremantle pick him up as a Category B rookie.
Mm-hmm.
But also wouldn't be surprised if maybe someone did take a punt on him sort of late in the draft. Did have a very, very good season. It's probably not talked about enough compared to the likes of like a Jacob Farrow, Sam Swadling, or Fred Rodriguez. Because
Mm-hmm.
with one, I think probably drops his value just because he is sort of club tied compared to the other three I mentioned for being sort of, I guess, the open pool. So I think for some certain prospects who are tied with like an NGA club, I guess their sort of attention kind of, I guess, is decreased.
Yeah, the sort of upper end of the higher end of the draft is an interesting one because we've got an awkward draft hand, I'd say. Like there isn't really any picks which are obvious for some of our club type players or some of the blokes who had a really good under 18 champs. We'll get on to Fred and Farrow a little bit later on, but while we're on the topic of NGA, I want to speak about a unique sort of player, and that's Tom Phillips, who's originally from East Freo, but he's been boarding over in Melbourne and been playing in the talent league for the Oakley Chargers. He did play for WA in the under 18 champs. He didn't necessarily tear up the competition. Are we going to go for Phillips though? Because as I mentioned, he is club tied. We've invested a little bit in him, and what do you know about him?
Well, being an East Freo, I do know a bit about Phillips, but not too much because I think when I was there, he probably was living over in Melbourne and would come back to Perth on like school holidays and did train with us for a little bit during the pre-season, but also with the state as well. He's a bit of a harder one for me to evaluate because I just haven't seen too much of him over in Melbourne, watching him playing for the Chargers or his school, Scotch College. So I only had exposure to him watching him playing for WA on the wing. So I think had some good moments in a couple of games, but again with the probably the same as like a lot of the players didn't have the carnival to light it up. So I wouldn't think Phillips would be one that Fremantle would necessarily nominate as a Cat B. So I think there's only the two of them that probably I'll talk about the most, and that being Whan and Ryder Luke.
Yeah, we'll get on to Ryder Luke later because he's some sort of talent. A name basically smack bang in the middle of that pick 20 and pick 47. He slid a little bit from where he was projected probably earlier in 2025 and even throughout parts of 2024, and that is Fred Rodriguez. Now, it feels like he's got a game and a personality that will probably translate straight away at AFL level, even if he's not translating at AFL, or even if he's not playing straight away at AFL level. He'll probably flourish in the environment straight away, no matter where he is. He played some real consistent footy at Colts, obviously. He kicked a crucial goal in his only league game for the year in round 1 against Perth, and particularly in that Colts grand final, where the Bulldogs got hammered, yet he just still had that resilience to keep on digging in. I thought he was the Bulldogs' best player by a fair way. I think showing that type of resilience on that big stage is something your recruiters will love, just the amount of hunt he showed from quarter 1 to quarter 4. My mindset with Fred at Freo, if we can get him here, is that O'Meara only probably has a year or two left, and the understudies for him, ever since Erasmus and Johnson have come in, have been those two. Now that Raz is basically a certified best 23 player, and Jono will still probably play a fair bit of footy in 2026, we probably need to bring in a midfielder under those two to develop appeal and sort of get a game here and there, and just as an understudy, because we've had an understudy at a lot of positions all over the ground, and I feel like our midfield depth, we've lost Will Brodie, Fife's retired, O'Meara's only got a year or two left, as I mentioned. We do sort of need an extra younger name in there, I feel, to sort of develop under those two. As I mentioned, our draft hand's a little bit awkward, and there isn't really an obvious pick to take him at with what we have. Do you see any way that Fred lands at Freo, given he wants to stay in WA, he's growing up a Dockers fan? We'll obviously be looking at him. Where do you think he lands?
Yeah, I think with Fred, probably the top end range of him probably being that sort of top 30 mark. Probably, I think Fremantle, if they really wanted to, they probably could maybe maneuver their way up from that pick 42 to get him. But I think probably it would be a good chance that Fred does sort of could land at Fremantle's pick. I think regardless whether he goes to Fremantle or another team, I think they'll get a good quality footballer and not only person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now another bloke that it's going to be hard to get. I'll be honest, given West Coast have a fair few picks in the first round, and they'll definitely be looking at someone homegrown. And the best of that crop is Jacob Farrow, who wasn't necessarily on the radar of a lot of people before the under-18 champs or before 2025, but he's flown up to sort of become the face of the WA crop of 2025. He had an astonishing campaign at Colts level, and in that first game of the under-18 championships, I hadn't necessarily seen a lot of him, and he only had 13 disposals, but you only had to watch the game to know that he will be a special player, and he is probably the player of this WA crop. As I mentioned, yet again, we're at an awkward position where we would maybe have to trade up to snatch him away from West Coast. I'm probably expecting him to stay in WA from what I've heard at least. I'm not sure if you've got some other information. Do you think we do trade up to try and get him to Freo, or do you think we'll be able to land him at pick 20 and back ourselves in?
I think if they had slid back in whatever deal they did in the trade period to go from, I think it was 12 odd to 20 odd, I think if they were there, that could probably be a really good chance to get Farrow. But I think with him probably being probably a top 15 prospect and a couple of clubs probably having multiple picks in that first round, especially in that sort of that teens mark. So particularly West Coast, I think it'd probably be very, very hard for Fremantle to try and get up and get him if they were to stay at the pick. They probably might have to try to probably move up the board, but with the pieces that I have with their picks, does another club probably would try and take their offer? Most likely Fremantle might have to offer up a future picks combined with their current first round pick to get up the board. So if they really wanted him, they probably might have to get creative and try and get him.
You would definitely say, though, he's best available in the WA draft class, wouldn't you? And what sort of player do you reckon Freo fans could expect if we get him?
Yeah, definitely. I think he would be on top of Fremantle's sort of draft board. I think I read a report somewhere. I think David Wars, their list manager, did really rate Farah highly. I think a lot of the comparisons from like the media and other sort of outlets have said is very much like sort of that Jordan Dawson, Hayden Young type, sort of those like mid-sized sort of intercept, but also rebounding defenders with the lethal left boot, but who also could like push into the midfield. So I think that's probably the main comparison of Farrow, which I do agree with.
Another West Perth product who's potentially in a similar position to maybe Fred on the draft board is Sam Swadling. Now, he only dropped below 34 disposals once at Colts level throughout the year, which is absolutely ridiculous. He is a certified stat stuffer. He had a few really solid league games as well for the Falcons. And it was the Colts game against your mob which really put him on the radar. 47 disposals, 7 marks, and 3 tackles against the Sharks. What can you tell me about Sam Swadling? Because he's certainly a stat stuffer, but will he translate at AFL level, and is he worth taking a punt on?
I think if you look at the stats purely, you would probably think he's just probably that contested ball that goes to every contest, gets the first possession, then dishes it off, or maybe the 1-2. But that's not necessarily the case with Swadling, because what I saw in that round 20 game in the Colts, sort of his work rate to go from contest to contest. So whether it be if a stoppage was down at D50, he would be there, and then they'll transition the ball, and he'll be the next stoppage at sort of, you'd say, probably the midfield or the wing. So I think his work rate is really, really good. So I think that's probably why you see Swanton get so much of the ball, because he's able to have that two-way running capacity to find the footy and also use it pretty well. So probably not the best sort of kick, but his hands are really, really good. So I think that his main trait is sort of his quick hands, but also his cleanliness as well. So I think probably with Fremantle, probably having probably this kind of like a similar midfield type. So Brayshaw, Sorrell, probably the more I guess, shorter, but can win a contested ball. So I think someone like Swally can sort of complement sort of it being a more of a bigger bodied sort of midfielder, but also sort of be the ones that probably would sort of get his hands dirty first, but also be able to sort of go from contest to contest.
Where do you see him going on draft night? And do you reckon it's a fair assumption that Freo could very well get him?
Yeah, I think sort of it being the sort of spot where sort of that maybe 30 to 50 mark. I think that's where a lot of sort of the top end WA players would probably end up in. So I think probably you'll see the likes of, I guess, Swelling, Rodriguez, even probably like Curtin as well. Probably you all see them sort of go around that range.
Now, there are a couple blokes at Swan Districts that are probably worth having a look at. Blake Kelly's a name I've seen pop up a little bit. I can't say I know much about him, but in particular from Swans, Leon Kickett, who's been heavily linked to Freo in the lead up to this draft. And from what I've seen, now I've got to be honest, I've watched no Swan Districts Colts footy throughout the year, so I could not tell you much about how he plays from quarter one to quarter four, but I've seen some of his highlight packages and they're always going to be good. He looks like a very, very exciting young talent. And from what I've seen, he's somebody I'd love to have develop under some of our more experienced smaller forwards. Can you tell us a bit more about these two?
Yeah, so I'll go with touch on Blake first. I think him being sort of like probably a reliable contested ball winner. I think averages, I think, sort of the high and high 20s in terms of disposal. I think sort of real hard nut. Also, a really good runner. He finished third in the state combine 2K. So also wanting to develop that sort of endurance space because he may not necessarily play as inside midfielder, so might play more outside or a winger. Should that happen at AFL level? And with kicker, I think that's probably someone Fremantle would probably target with their first round pick. I think a small forward would be a massive need for the club, especially like I mentioned before, the retirement of Michael Walters and Jack Delaney being delisted. So I think there's a hole for that small forward role. So I think he would be one that Fremantle would look at. I think, yeah, he's a X factor type of small forward. So very similar to Simon. He can run, he's quick, he can jump. So I think that's someone Fremantle fans should probably have a look at in the lead up to the draft and have a look at his highlight packages.
Now, a man that absolutely tore up the Waffle Colts grand final was Cody Curtin, a 200 centimetre brute who is still growing, I'd assume. You don't usually stop growing at this age, and especially when you've already grown that tall. I reckon he's going to be Victor Wembanyama areas by the time he peaks. He had 6 goals and tore the South Freo backline to shreds in that grand final, and he's also a Freo fan. He's not likely to go super high in the draft, and I almost feel like he's a little bit of a sleeper pick given the lack of national attention he's been getting. Is he somebody that we should be looking at with one of our mid-range picks?
Potentially, I think sort of you can always have sort of never too much sort of key position depth, particularly that's like a commodity that a lot of clubs would like. So with Cody, he this year sort of developed more of his versatility, playing more of like a second rock due to his height and also his physicality. But yeah, his main sort of position is that sort of big contested marking key forward, which this year he's shown sort of the volume he gets of scoring shots. So this year he had 3 hauls of 5 and then 2 hauls of 6, and that was including in that grand final. So they do the Claremont mid sort of do sort of feed him the ball. I think he is their go-to guy, and I think rarely gets beaten rarely got beaten this season. So I think someone that's like some clubs could probably, I guess, take a punt on, especially Fremantle if they really wanted another sort of I guess sort of forward to sort of help underneath sort of that Josh Tracy, Jai Amos, and Paddy Voss. So I think it's someone Fremantle would definitely look at.
Moving on to Subiaco, Hudson Walker. Now, he was the hero in that first champs game against Vic Country with a goal effectively after the siren to win the game. He played a few really solid games at Colts level. Actually, out of all the Colts footy I watched this year, I actually did watch a fair bit of Subiaco, and I really liked from what I saw. He played that high half forward role for a lot of the year, and he could really rack up the pill from there. And it feels like Freo sometimes miss that linking piece from their midfield to their forward line. Is Hudson someone that would be of interest in adding to our list? And what have you seen from him throughout 2025?
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of like you said, I think that's probably someone or something that Fremantle would definitely need. Sort of sometimes in their game, sort of that sort of disconnection between sort of going from their midfield to forward 50 is probably would be is an issue. So I think definitely someone of Hudson's like caliber would help. So I think playing at Colts level this year when he did, so I think he showed to be a really good, reliable ball winner for Subi. And then when he played state and also league footy for the Lions as well, show that he can be sort of that reliable sort of link up half forward type where they can set up the goals or even like kicking them himself. So I think that's someone I guess Fremantle would look at probably late in the draft, potentially with one of their rookie picks.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to see him be added to our stocks. I'm not sure how I don't know, viable it would be, given we've already spoken about 10 names. We've all said a locks to come to the Dockers. So, yeah, hopefully he's a man that's on our radar. Now, we don't have unlimited list spots, but this is a man you mentioned earlier, and it's another South Freo product who is also a part of our NGA, and he could miss the cut based off some recent reports. Ryder Luke is who I'm talking about. He had that incredible 8-goal game for the Colts side against Swan Districts earlier this year and was repeatedly a consistent performer in front of goal for the rest of the year. He had 3, 2, 1, 2, and another couple performances with 2 goals. He's sort of that medium-sized that medium-sized mould that a Sam Sturt type played for us a couple years ago. Now, Richmond are reportedly hunting him down pretty hard in the lead up to this draft to snatch him away from us. Is he a player you'd be absolutely 100% in not letting him go anywhere else, or would you not lose much sleep over not having him at Freo?
I think if hypothetically a bid came for him before one of Freo's later picks, I probably possibly would let go. But if he was like sort of close to that range, I probably would take a punt on Luke. So I think with Luke, you saw 8 kicks, 8 goals, 100% efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something a lot of clubs would like to look at because I think sometimes playing that sort of high medium forward role, you probably won't get too much of the pill. So I think anytime when you can sort of get a touch of the footy, you try to make the most out of it as a forward. So I think with Ryder, he's been a consistent sort of forward for South Freo this year. Hasn't really been kept goalless, always hits the scoreboard. So I think that's someone Fremantle could look at as one of their sort of 2 category B rookies should they go without a bid. So I think that's something the club would definitely weigh up on whether like is he worth sort of taking matching a bid regardless of where that comes.
Now, you are the go-to draft man in the WA scene, and what you're about to tell me is what David Walls will be listening to in the lead up to the draft. So be very careful with what you're about to say. I want your top 5 WA prospects for the Dockers in particular. Not necessarily best available, given we can't go and get whoever we want because we've got a bit of a compromised draft hand. But which 5 players should we head into the draft absolutely fixated on trying to get with picks 20, 47, 69, and if we use any others or even trade up the draft order?
I think we're definitely with the first pick, I would definitely try to target Farrow. I think definitely sort of feels that need as a sort of rebounding, aggressive halfback. So I think even though we've got Clark and they've got McVie, I think that's probably the commodity a lot of clubs do want, and that's probably like the game of the game of today, sort of really generating that run and gun of halfback. So he's number 1. Number 2, I think I probably would have Leon Kickett to fill that need as a small forward. So I think he's one I would be looking at. Number 3, I probably would have, I guess, one of those sort of, I guess, quality WA on balls. So whether that be Swadling or Rodriguez, I think that would be my 3 and 4. So I think with like you said this year with the retirement of Fife and even like Aish before probably did play a bit of midfield before transitioning back. So I think there's still that element of you need that next wave of sort of talent coming through because you've got the best 23. So you got the absolute echelon of Brayshaw and Sarong, and then you've got the next of Erasmus and Johnson, you need that next one. So I think the likes of Swadling and Rodriguez would be my 4 and 5. And the last one I have is Kobe Evans. So he's a West Coast NGA prospect. But I think with his year, it could maybe potentially be one of those NGA players that West Coast miss out on, just because even though they did have their concessions of the added list spots, he's probably someone Fremantle could target, because I think with their list profile, I think it's generally in good shape. So I think they're in a position that they can sort of take a risk on someone who probably hasn't had what the best years of footy just because of his injury. But I think the quality of Kobe Evans is there. I think sort of that sort of bigger bodied, but also sort of mid forward, but also has incredible pace. So I think that's someone that Fremantle, I would say, probably would definitely put a bid on. If I was them, I probably he's one I would look at.
Yeah, we didn't speak about Kobe Evans because I just assumed he would be all hands off given his West Coast NGA. But where on draft night could he potentially fall if he does find his way into the purple?
Yeah, I think definitely he definitely in a tough spot because of the amount of footy he played this year. So I think showing glimpses of his talent, but I think clubs will have to sort of do their due diligence and think about, is he sort of, I guess, worth taking a risk in sort of that sort of 20 to 40 marks. I think definitely onwards he would probably be taken if a bid would come around that sort of, I guess, 40 to 60 marks. I think if not, then he would be one of those players that West Coast might take with their sort of category B rookie spots. I think definitely like a risk worth taking.
Well, that's a lot of information. Hopefully the faithful have all mopped it up, because there's a fair bit of media going around the WA draft space heading into the draft in what's just under 4 weeks' time now. So, Chris, thank you for joining me today on the podcast. Where can the people find you if they want more of your draft analysis?
No worries. Thanks, UCAT. So I think this being sort of, I guess, the time of the draft, so that's where all the my analysis comes of the best sort of 16 players of WA is coming out. So go on Instagram at WA Footy Prospect. So that's where you'll find all the player analysis I make, sort of what their strengths, what their weaknesses, how their season went, and then you can sort of see like who, what clubs might target what.
Well, thanks for joining me, Chris. Go and check him out at WA Footy Prospects on Instagram. There'll be some more draft content in the lead up to the draft on November 19 and 20. Rate the pod 5 stars on Spotify if you haven't already. Give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Drews will be back on the channel within the next few weeks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Up the Dockers.